Self-deprecating is, no, I'm not, man. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not actually really good at this at all. Not being able to own it. Humility is, thank you so much. I've worked diligently at this over the last 7 years, and I'm trying to get better every single day. So the fact that you recognize all of the challenging, hard work I put in really means a lot to me.
And she said, Alan, that's exactly what a humble man would say. And I went, oh, am I humble? And then there goes the humility. But that's playful. I'm not kidding. I never identified as humble. But what if I was just always believing in myself more than I was humble so no one could ever see it?
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. Today, for episode number 1777, Juggling Confidence and Humility. I remember Alan and I had a conversation one time, and we were talking about the Rock. And we were talking about how the Rock seems like he's super vulnerable. And then we got to the understanding, and I don't know if it's real or not, this is my perception of the understanding, that since the Rock is so intimidating, he needs to be way more vulnerable to even seem relatable. And then we started to think of people in our lives that were not intimidating at all, and they didn't have to be as vulnerable. So for The Rock, vulnerability makes him look strong. For someone who doesn't necessarily have the same amount of quote-unquote strength that The Rock does, they don't need as much vulnerability to make them look strong. We're not talking about any of that today. But what we're talking about does have to do with that.
Nice job.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That was good.
You got to pause. So we're talking about juggling confidence and humility. If Alan is more confident than me, imagine, hypothetically speaking, imagine a world where Alan Lazarus was more confident than Kevin Palmieri. Just imagine what that world would be like. Alan has to be more humble than me, or he will seem arrogant. So if Alan is level 10 level 10 self-belief, level 10 confident, if he has level 7 humility, it's probably going to come off as a level 3 arrogant.
Yeah.
Now, this is
that's devastating news.
It is devastating news. Who knew not really believing in yourself
Yeah.
could be such a superpower?
There's
not
strengths with every weakness, my
it's
friend.
It's not hard to be humble when you have level 2 self-belief.
Agreed.
It's not as hard. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. Again, this is kind of a newer thought in NLU. I would say this is kind of like I don't want to say the flavor of the week, but this is kind of a new awareness that we've had. And I think Alan led the charge on this, so I'll kick it to you and we'll see what happens.
So the first thing I want to share is when you and I first met, and this is for anyone watching or listening, I want you thinking about your own level of confidence. Kevin and I talk a lot about ourselves, but it's really so that we're holding up the mirror so you can self-assess. So when I first met Kev, I thought that I was significantly more confident than he was. And I do think externally that's true. I've come to start questioning whether or not I'm more confident in who I am, my character. I would say that you are more confident in your character. I think I'm more confident in my capabilities. And that's a whole nother episode, and that's not what we're talking about today. But when you were talking about The Rock, his intimidation factor is level 10, and so he needs to be vulnerable in order to be relatable. Otherwise, he'll come off as very arrogant and unrelatable.
Yeah.
Someone who is maybe really struggling and who doesn't come off as very strong naturally, maybe them being vulnerable actually makes them seem weak, which is why I think a lot of people who seem humble actually aren't that humble because they're not very vulnerable. I'm going to go into a story to try to make all this land. I was on a coaching session earlier today, and I was going through, so to provide context, this client I've been working with him for years, and he has an opportunity to work with 2 different leaders, let's just say, okay? And he's at a crossroads in his career. One of the problems that we've identified in his career that's a bottleneck to his growth is he's working under a level 2 leader, a really not very good leader, a leader who's narcissistical, a leader who is constantly holding on to control, a leader who's deeply insecure, pretending not to be, a leader who's not humble or vulnerable, that kind of thing. And there's this other leader that he's excited to work with and work for that is actually confident and humble, and he really wants to get under this other guy's wing to learn and grow and contribute. And it's a really obvious thing for him and I at this stage, but for me it was very obvious from the get just talking about this other guy. This other guy, we'll call him Chris. First names only. His name is Chris. So this guy, Chris, is what I think is a very strong transformational leader. My intuition says 8 out of 10. Very confident, very humble, very wanting what's best for everyone, very wanting to find the win-win-win, very lead by example, don't practice what you preach, and don't try to tell other people, don't be a dictator. Whereas this other leader is, I'm not going to do any of it, but you need to go do it. And I'm smoke and mirrors, and I'm going to try to manipulate my way to get you to all do the work so that I benefit. And that's just my freaking truth, okay? And I'm just sick and tired of watching my clients suffer because of this other terrible leader. So anyways, the point of all this is we were going through and rating leadership qualities of each of these individuals. And two of the leadership qualities was, or the things to look out for, was arrogance was one of them. And we were going down the list for each of these leaders, and my client said a 7 for this Chris guy as arrogant. And I said, my intuition said, no way. Chris doesn't sound arrogant to me at all. And he said, Alan, he's very sure of himself. And I said, the definition of arrogant is someone who thinks they're better than they are. Mm. And he said, oh, yeah, no, 2. He's amazing. What? This Chris guy is amazing. He doesn't think he's better than he is. And if he does, it's only a slight amount. This is the problem with humility, confidence, arrogance, this whole thing. You don't know how good someone really is. So if arrogance is you thinking you're better than you are, how do you know how good someone actually is? Like, if I say I'm a great coach, does that make me arrogant? What if I actually am a great coach?
Depends what you compare to. That's the hard
Exactly.
thing.
And that's why this is so wonky. Because I remember Kev used to say this. He said, talking about what you did isn't arrogant. Talking about what you're going to do always comes off as arrogant. And in my head, it was like, what? I mean, is it arrogant for us to say that we're going to cross 2,000 episodes? Is that arrogant? I mean, we're going to cross 2,000 episodes. I just think it's accurate.
If you
Eventually
said that
we'll get there.
If you said that at episode 1, I would say it sounds drastically more arrogant than at 1777, right?
Right.
Because now there's proof.
So here's the frame. And this is brand new for me, so I'm actually pretty outside my comfort zone with guiding on any level in this, because this was recent. This week, I realized, maybe last week, if I do have a lot of self-belief, which is just certainty in one's own capabilities, we'll call it. Self-belief and certainty are the same thing. Yeah. Some of it's fake, delusional certainty, and some of it's real, accurate certainty. And I try really hard to be accurately certain. But anyways, if I have level 10 self-belief and only level 9 humility, I'm going to come off as level 1 arrogant, because 10 minus 9 is 1. And so this Chris guy, I felt bad for him in that moment, because it's very clear to me he's not arrogant. He seems like a great leader. And my client thinks he's arrogant. I think you don't understand what humility actually is. I said arrogance is thinking you're better than you really are. Does he think he's better than he really is? And he's like, no, not really. Well, why do you think he's arrogant then?
Yeah.
And so that's the real struggle, and I felt for him in that moment, because my whole life it seems like everyone thinks I'm arrogant, and I've never really fully understood it until now. It's because I'm not as humble as I need to be to balance out my certainty of long-term strategic belief.
It's hard because belief dictates the amount you believe in yourself, or self-belief, whatever we want to label it as. It dictates the way you show up in everything.
Yeah.
It dictates the way you show up in everything. If you're the type of person who is really quick, say you're out to eat, you're out to dinner and you're really quick to get the check, and you're just supremely confident. You're the type of person to raise your hand and say, maybe you know the waiter's name. Hey, Chris, we're good over here. We'll take the check when you're ready. Anybody who's insecure is probably going to think that's arrogant. It's like, well, Chris is in the middle of something. Like, why don't you wait until Chris comes back and is ready? Did I use the same name as one of the leaders? I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, you did.
Steve.
Steve McQueen, our old mascot.
Wearing the hyperconscious tank top. Certain things are going to seem arrogant to certain people, even if they're not, because they don't have the same level of self-belief.
If they did, they would do the same things. Like, I would be someone who would do that.
Right.
Just because I'm not super concerned about looking bad or whatever. I don't know why I would do that. But I think there's certain tells in poker. You can tell there's tells when people are bluffing. That's why every poker tournament, if you ever watch them on TV, they all have hats and glasses on because they don't want anyone to tell when they're lying. Yeah. Essentially, there's tells. There are certain tells for people who lack humility. And I definitely, like I said, I would say that arrogance is a weakness. But I don't think it's nearly as much of a weakness as people think.
You don't think it's nearly as much of a weakness as people think for you?
I think arrogance is a huge weakness in human beings.
Oh.
I think humility is the most important character trait in the game. And I think that it's a wildly misunderstood concept.
So you're saying it's not that most people are arrogant, it's that many people lack self-belief, and if they had more self-belief, they would realize that maybe there is some arrogance, but it's not outright arrogance. It's just the difference between the humility and the belief.
And then the plot thickens even more because if I believe in myself at level 10 in this arena, sometimes it crosses over to everything.
Yeah.
And you and I found that back in the day. This was something that Kevin and I, one of the reasons we don't have guests anymore is because someone would come in with level 10 confidence and self-belief in their thing, and then they'd start teaching health when they are not, they didn't earn that. They're not, and we could tell they were misguiding our audience.
Yeah, it's hard to segment.
It's very hard to know where you're good and where you're not. When you have a lot of self-belief, and you know this because you've started to believe in yourself a lot more, it leaks into everything.
Well, it's hard to segment a pedestal. When you put somebody on a pedestal, it's really hard to segment that. And there's no steps on the pedestal. The pedestal is the same height all the way across, whether we're talking about health, wealth, life, love, sex, parenting, cars. But in reality, there should be steps in between all of those things. I know way more about podcasting than I do parenting. What are you laughing at?
Before this episode, again, behind the scenes, I just failed at my goal. I just
you already
touched
did.
the mic.
You already did.
I did?
Yes. Yeah. Alan said, I'm not going to touch the mic. Yeah, 5 minutes ago. I'm not going to touch the mic at all this episode. I noticed once, and then I was then I just moved on because I knew you lost.
Oh, damn.
It's okay.
I lost focus. I got in flow.
It's okay. That's good. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Fail forward.
It's all gravy. I already touched the mic too, but that wasn't my, I don't know. For
goal.
me, I don't care about touching it.
So how do we explain this in a way that's helpful?
I think the way you explained it was very helpful. I would suggest, or I guess in my mind, I would venture to guess that most people aren't going to deal with the same level of this that you do because you have very, very high belief.
How do you build humility? I know how to build belief. I don't know how to build humility.
I think the best way to build
doing hard things.
Yeah. I think humility and self-worth are connected. I just don't know how yet. It's really, there's a fine line between being humble and being self-deprecating. I think it's an equation of self-belief, self-worth, and self-awareness. Ooh, do we just make something up? Are we about to make up a framework live right now? Is Kevin going to lead this, spearhead this? Ooh.
Best framework you ever created up to date, in my opinion, is time. I always get the order wrong, I know. But wrong time perspective, wrong approach. Hold on, don't give it to me. Wrong time perspective, wrong approach.
It's hard when you do it out of order.
I know.
What do you have at the beginning when you start something?
Wrong strategy. No, that's the approach.
Expectations.
Wrong expectations. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. I need to Dude, that's a really good. I mean, that's why people fail. That's an equation for failure, is what that is.
I think this is a very similar thing where it's probably 3 or 4 different things that make up the equation. And I think self-belief, I don't know, how many people actually know how much they believe in themselves? That's the problem.
It's an alarmingly not asked question.
If you're over, so let's say you think you have a level, if you're under, if you think you have a level 9 self-belief, but you really have a level 7 self-belief, that right there suggests that you're not going to be as humble as you should.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you have a level 7 self-worth, but you actually have a level 2 self-worth, you're probably not going to be as actually humble. You might be self-deprecating, but there's a big difference between me saying, when somebody gave me a really good compliment yesterday on a podcast about the way I answered questions. Self-deprecating is, no, I'm not, man. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not actually really good at this at all. Not being able to own it. Humility is, thank you so much. I've worked diligently at this over the last 7 years, and I'm trying to get better every single day. So the fact that you recognize all of the challenging, hard work I've put in really means a lot to me. That's the truth. The truth is, I own the fact that you gave me the compliment. Thank you so very much for that compliment. And I plan on using that compliment to get even better. That's really what I'm after.
If they were to say, Kev, you're the best podcaster on earth, it takes humility to say, I appreciate that, but I'm not so sure. You see how humility is...
Unless you believe it.
Exactly. And that's where everything gets wonky from the third-party perspective.
But yeah, that would seem very arrogant. If I came on here, imagine if I believed I was the best podcaster on the planet, which I do not. I think I'm in a percentage. I think I'm really good at what I do.
Would you say top 1%?
Yes.
Nice.
I would say higher than top 1%.
Would old Kevin think you're arrogant right now?
Yes, most likely.
That sucks. That makes me so sad. That makes me so... But it's true.
In a weird way, it was very cute the way you said that. How you said, like, it makes me so sad. It was very cute way to say it.
It makes me so sad.
I say that all the time on other podcasts. I say one of the hardest realizations for me is that 26-year-old Kev probably wouldn't like 34-year-old Kev. I would trigger him.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah, to talk about an identity crisis.
I know that 35-year-old Alan would have trouble with 18-year-old Alan.
Understandable.
But I wouldn't hate him. Definitely not. I would just try to explain some stuff.
What would 18-year-old Alan think of 35-year-old Alan?
Oh my goodness. It would be...
What do you look up
to?
So
I did this in therapy. We did a meditation, and we went back to my childhood, and I have a lot of the memories still. And this is going to get a little weird, so whatever. In the meditation, I was at a party in high school, and my therapist said, imagine you now there at that party. And I was just, whoa. And my response was, you shouldn't be here. I wanted to go up to him and say, you don't belong here. You shouldn't be here. You're too amazing to be here. Hello, NLU listener. Thank you, as always, for listening to Next Level University. Real quick, I just want to jump in and let you know about the Next Level Dreamliner. This is a journal that I use every single day. Achieve your dreams 90 days at a time. It breaks down your dreams into goals, milestones, and daily habits. We hope you enjoy it. The link will be in the show notes. And the other piece that I realized too is, and this is alarming for me, but I realized that that environment at that party, I remember it specifically, and it's kind of a memory with all the parties merged too, by the way, in this, but there was no humility whatsoever. At those parties, there was very little people with humility around me. And that's really hard to see. And I myself included, I lacked humility and maturity too. But not as much as a lot of the people. Yeah. And that's been really, you can feel the emotions in me right now. There was no humility back then in the environment that I grew up in. That is, I will just say that, and maybe a lot of the listeners can resonate. Go back and look at your childhood. Was there humility? That was not present at all in my life, honestly. And that's the law of attraction happening, because my mom and stepdad did not have high humility, in my honest opinion.
Yeah.
And they attract other people with low humility. And so humility is, for me, the cheat code. It's the most important thing from now on. For 35-year-old Alan, I've decided humility is the most important thing. Core inner humility. You don't need to like say I suck or anything like that. I'm not talking about external modesty. I'm talking about inner core, I'm grateful to be here humility. I'm grateful for running water. I'm grateful for believing in myself at all. I'm grateful for living in a free country. I think it shows humility to have an attitude of gratitude and to earn what you want to achieve. To earn, I think the opposite of humility is entitlement. Being entitled to this. I'm going to win the show because I'm awesome. Like, you're entitled to winning because you think you're better. It's this weird thing. So anyways, I don't want to go down the whole thing about me, but the humility piece for me, I never understood what it was. I never understood why it mattered. And I always thought, well, I read books, like I study hard, I take the tests, I work harder than other people. Doesn't that show humility? I work really hard.
Nobody sees that. It almost, that's the best, obviously you know this. I mean, this is like a lesson that you share often. The best thing that ever happened to you was Emilia, because you met someone who believed in themselves more than you believed in yourself and saw how people treated her. So I understand that there's certain things that we say, like, that's an Alan thing. Alan and Emilia thing. Like, you guys believe in yourself so much. I know not most people, I've never met two humans who believe in themselves more than you guys.
But we don't know that. Like, we don't understand that. We don't understand why more people don't. And now I'm starting to, I am. But back when I met her, I had no idea why we were different in that. Yeah. So, and that's a whole nother episode probably, but I want to share this too, because I think this will be valuable for the listeners. Emilia is the only person who's ever told me that I was humble. Oh, I've been very complimented and I'm very grateful for many things. You believe in yourself so much, you're so confident, you're so capable, you're so smart. I've gotten that. And I also get the opposite of all the horrible things, honestly.
Unfortunately.
Way more than I get the compliments, by the way. But
makes sense, though.
I know.
Right.
Emilia said to me, she said, I've never met such a humble man. You're the most humble man I've ever met. And I swear to you, I said this. I said, I really appreciate that, sweetheart. I genuinely do. But I've never personally identified as humble. And she said, Alan, that's exactly what a humble man would say. And I went, oh, am I humble? And then there goes the humility. But that's playful. I'm not kidding. I never identified as humble. But what if I was just always believing in myself more than I was humble, so no one could ever see it? Because I definitely don't feel like I'm always arrogant. I struggle with arrogance at times, but I know people that are way more arrogant than me.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, but no one ever called them arrogant, so I didn't understand.
Because they don't. It's so hard. One of the hardest things about you and your journey is you actually do the things you say you're going to do, and then when you lose, it makes you look arrogant. We were talking about that earlier. We're going to do a little bit of... no, we're not going to really talk about that. But I was... we will. We'll talk about it at some point. It's just not tomorrow's episode. But that's a really hard thing, is when somebody has a lot of self-belief, they try stuff that other people don't try, and then they lose sometimes because that's how it goes. And then people see that moment and think, like, yeah, you were arrogant. You lost the show when you said you were going to win. I thought you were arrogant a little bit when you did your fitness show and I told you were going to lose. I thought the way you showed up was arrogant.
I was a little bit.
Yeah.
But not 10 out of 10 arrogant. It's not like I was...
10 out of 10. No. No, okay. But it's the aspiration dictates the arrogance. Doesn't necessarily dictate it, but you know what I mean?
Dictates the perception of the arrogance.
You were like, Kev, I'm gonna stomp. Of course I'm going to win. It's like, Alan, you need to put down the chicken broccoli Alfredo pizza, son.
I've done this on the reg.
I've done this before. You are in trouble, sir.
Hey, I did put them down.
Yeah, you put them down to your,
Every
your
other
gullet. Your gullet. What I wanted to say, this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me put a little something on my own spin here, okay?
Yeah.
Most of what we talked about today is probably not relevant to most people when we're talking about you. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's make it helpful.
That's what I'm trying to do. You
How
know
do
what
we
I mean?
make it helpful?
That's what we're going to do right now. Maybe, hopefully. This is my thought. If somebody thinks you're arrogant, I would venture to guess that they think you believe in yourself less than you actually believe in yourself. That's an initial start.
Or they think you believe in yourself more than you should, based on your results. Because that's what it was.
That's fair too.
You thought that I believed in myself more than I should, and based on that specific show, you're absolutely right.
But let's just say you don't really know what the results are. It's like, let's just say you meet someone. Let's say you just meet someone and you're like, you get that initial vibe and you get that intuition and you get the feeling and you start thinking and it's like, there's no way you should believe in yourself as much as you do.
I have one more story that I have to share. This will help. I promise. This is not about me.
Let's do it.
I was at, I think, Block Island. I was at the beach with a couple friends. And they loved football. They're obsessed with football. They played football in high school. And I was in college, and we were at the beach having a blast. And we met someone who was on the Colts. In the NFL, for the global listeners, in the National Football League. Bench player, but he was on the Colts. And we were hanging out with him with a bunch of girls, and we had a blast. It was like a party. It was awesome on the beach. And later on the drive home, these two friends of mine were talking. And I say friends loosely. Because one of them I couldn't stand, let's be honest. Okay. And they said, oh my God, that guy, he's so awesome. Like, he's so humble. I was like, this dude was not even a little bit humble, Kev. But what I realized in that moment is that because he was in the NFL, they projected that he's supposed to be arrogant. And so humility is perception. People's perception of humility is complete. This dude had no humility. This dude thought he was the bee's knees. But to them, he should be that way because he was in the NFL and they value football at level 10. So you see how wonky this gets?
It's super wonky.
It's very hard to gauge. And I remember how much that bothered me, and I figured out why. It's because just because they perceive he should be more arrogant than he is, he's humble, even though they perceive that I shouldn't believe in myself to the level I do, so they think I'm arrogant.
Yeah,
that dude's way more arrogant than I was by a significant margin, but he was in the NFL, so it's okay. I don't have whatever that is. I don't like just because you're in the NFL does not mean you get permission to be arrogant. There's none of that for me.
Yeah.
If anything, you should be more humble because you actually were a bench player. Right?
Well, that's the thing is amongst other players, he probably is more humble. Because there's the pecking order. You know what I mean?
I don't know, man. Hey, I don't know.
Well, no. I mean,
yeah, but
no.
I'm
just saying.
But that's one of the things. Perception of humility and actual humility are two completely different things.
For sure.
And I think that's really cool to understand. Yeah.
You and I have talked a lot about martial arts on the podcast.
Yeah.
And you'll compliment me on certain things. And the first thing I always say is, Alan, compared to you, I might be a black belt, but compared to a black belt, I am the worst.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
So there's the
Levels.
pecking order.
Levels, yeah.
Yeah, there's just the pecking order. Maybe compared to your average person.
So is humility knowing where you actually fall? That's what humility is knowing where you actually are. Yeah.
Yeah, but it changes depending on where you are.
I know. Big fish, small pond, small minnow, huge ocean.
It's never the same.
Really, yeah, it's so true.
That's why it's so. I think that's why it's so hard. And then
so it's almost like as you mature, you start to realize how big the world is and how where you just start to understand where you really fall. That's I think hopefully maturity and humility hopefully come hand in hand.
But I think just like anything else, you either undershoot or overshoot. Is anybody actually?
But your
accurate?
percent error shouldn't be off as much as it was when you were 18. I mean, you and I thought we were, I thought I was good at basketball. You thought you were good at baseball. Now that if we step on the MLB and I step in the NBA, we're not going to touch the ball.
Right.
And I think that as you get older and you mature, I think you start to learn that. So hopefully maturity and humility come hand in hand as you start to learn how big the world is.
I think humility goes away when delusion goes away. Humility increases when delusion goes away.
That is absolutely, and delusion is, the antidote to delusion is accurate thinking,
Right.
which is what Hyperconscious Podcast was all about. So it makes sense that we've become more humble.
It all comes, well, I don't know.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know. I mean, right there, that statement. You can't say that.
When we listen to old episodes,
I know.
we are.
I couldn't. I tried yesterday. I couldn't do it. Again, was I arrogant to my standards today? Yeah. Did I think I was arrogant back then? No, not at all.
That's another layer to this. Yeah.
It's
Real
very
quick, I know we got to
hyper-conscious.
jump.
Yeah. What do you got?
Can you talk about, would you be willing to talk about
Oh boy.
why you can't listen to old episodes? Because I feel like it's hard to.
I mean, I can try. I don't know if I actually have the depths of the answer. I'm embarrassed. Not of the content.
Same.
I'm
Same.
embarrassed of me. The way I showed up on the microphones. Yeah, my
Same.
energy.
Why?
Because I'm over. On the drive to 5, I'm over. Back then, I was over. Compared to where I am today,
I know.
I'm over. I can't listen. I'm loud because I'm not confident. I don't speak very loudly today. I don't care if you interrupt me.
Well, what do you mean? I'm kidding.
It was just, but I also think I was excited. Like, this is cool. I get to do
some of
this.
that was excitement, and some of that was fake confidence.
I think a lot of it was fake confidence. That's what I had to do in order to get through some of the interviews we had that early on. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for the caliber of human we were interviewing.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to protect myself.
Then why am I embarrassed by it? Maybe because I wasn't as vulnerable. Maybe it's because I wasn't as vulnerable or as authentic. That's probably why it bothers me. Is I don't feel like I was as authentic.
And same, I think when I say I felt like I was over and I had more ego, it's just I wasn't authentic. I wasn't that humble.
Yeah.
I thought I was. I thought I was being as, and maybe I was. Maybe this is the wrap it up with a bow. Maybe I was being as humble as I possibly could have been. Don't know. I thought I
were
was
humble for your age. I would say you probably were for men your age. I would
maybe,
say yeah.
But if you asked me back then, I would probably have identified as humble, and I don't think that makes you not humble. I think I'm humble.
One last thing. What if you were also trying to mirror and match my confidence?
I'm sure I was. We are going to talk about that tomorrow, son.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll leave it there. But and what if that's why you're embarrassed at the way you showed up? Because it wasn't real for you, and it might have been more real for me, even though I'm still embarrassed too.
I think I'm embarrassed of even the solo episodes before you and I partnered up.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
I think it's
That's
one
good.
of those.
I'm grateful you said that because I just felt really bad and guilty a little bit.
No, you're good. No, it has nothing to do. I won't say it has nothing to do with you. It's not you. It's not a you issue. I think it's one of those things where when you're really, really, really afraid to do something, sometimes you rely on your ego to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have been. How do you be vulnerable enough to do something that scares you by yourself? I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know when I was doing that, there was probably... I can think back, and it didn't feel like I had ego, but I'm sure I had protectors up to make sure I didn't sound like an idiot or to make me believe in what I was actually saying. I think that's the... But then what I think really getting good at something is getting to the point where you can do it authentically.
Yeah, agreed.
The way Alan and I are talking right now, this is one of my favorite episodes we've ever done, because this is exactly how we talk behind the scenes. This could have been a behind-the-scenes conversation, and I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
That is...
I would say it's closer to that than it's ever been.
Well, I mean, I swear more behind the scenes, for sure.
But we might, 5 years from now, listen to this and feel still a percentage of ego. We probably will.
I don't think so. A percentage, but a less percentage.
Much less. Yeah, much less.
Yeah, because go listen to episode 1000. There's a definitive timeline. I don't know what the exact number is, but when we crossed a certain... When I stopped screaming into the microphone, that helped a lot for me, for sure. I just thought that's who I was supposed to be. Shout out to whoever left us a negative review and said Kevin blows my eardrums out every time. That was constructive. I was pissed at the time. But then Alan was like, dude, I've actually, some rumblings that's actually happening. It's like, no shit. Damn.
Tough feedback is so bad.
Tough
It's
feedback
so
is so
hard
bad.
sometimes. It's so
All right,
hard.
we're going to get out of here. Please make sure you are subscribed, whether you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast platform you are listening to us on, or on YouTube if you are watching us in crisp, clear 4K. I think that's what StreamYard does. I don't know. To make sure you never miss an opportunity to get to the next level, we want to help you get there every single day, and that is why we do an episode every single day.
I have a blog that I just published, blog number 19. It's on my LinkedIn. We're going to put a link in the show notes to my LinkedIn profile. There's a blog number 19. It's all about the ego and the 3 layers of the ego, and it talks about how to be more authentically you. The name of let me see if I can remember the name of the blog. It's how to become more of the real you. No, how to become more of the true you. And I really feel like it's a very practical way to try to not live so armored up and to really start to understand why your ego's there and what real humility is. I've been working really hard to figure out the true self and what humility is and how to build it. And so join us in that journey. The link will be in the show notes.
As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we don't have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Keep it humble. Next Level Nation.